Hey folks, we have a word from one of our sponsors today, a very comfortable and fashionable sponsor. Men's closets were due for a radical reinvention, and Rhone stepped up to the challenge. Rhone's commuter collection is the most comfortable, breathable, and flexible set of products known to man, and here is why. Rhone helps you get ready for any occasion with the commuter collection, which offers the world's most comfortable pants, dress shirts, quarter zips, and polos. You never have to worry about what to wear when you have the Rhone commuter collection. Rhone's comfortable four-way stretch fabric provides breathability and flexibility that leaves you free to enjoy what life throws your way when you commute to work or to your 18 holes of golf. It's time to feel confident without the hassle. With Rhone's wrinkle release technology, wrinkles disappear as you stretch and wear the products. It's that easy. And with Gold Fusion anti-odor technology, you'll be smelling fresh and clean all day long. And on top of that, Rhone is 100% machine washable, so you can ditch the dry cleaner altogether. I got one of those Rhone shirts for my fiance. They are amazing because you don't really have to worry about, especially if you're traveling, how wrinkled they're going to be when they get out of the suitcase. They have that four-way stretch fabric. It's like one of those, fancy workout products, but it looks like a really nice dress shirt. And they have a bunch of other things, pants, even suit jackets, and pants that also are great for traveling. I've yet to dip into that, or we have, but truly, it's the kind of thing where, like, if you're feeling a little bit lazy, you can leave it in the dryer, and then you can take it out and hang it up for a bit, and it's not going to be wrinkled.
Or if maybe you wear sweatpants maybe a little bit too often and should upgrade to something a little bit nicer, but still kind of
but still very cozy. It's that kind of deal. And the quality is so good. So it's a great investment in your look. The commuter collection can get you through any workday and straight into whatever comes next. Head to Rhone.com/Majority Report and use promo code Majority Report, one word, to save 20% off your entire order. That's 20% off your entire order when you head to Rhone, RHONE.com/Majority Report, and use code Majority Report, one word. It's time to find your corner office comfort. And now, on to the show.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Thursday, April 4th, 2024. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Arvin Alaigh on the good news for progressives on the ballot in New Jersey. And later in the show, Mya Frazier will be with us to talk about our country's depraved eviction systems. Also on the show today, a dystopian report in 972 magazine reveals the IDF is using AI to bomb male Palestinians, including a program called Where's Daddy to kill them in their homes with their families. Biden is reportedly angry over the IDF assassinating the World Central Kitchen workers, but says he will not change course on his support for Israel. The New York Times, though, is reporting that his own wife is pleading with him to, quote, stop it now. He has a call with Netanyahu today, another stern talking to, I'm sure. One Muslim leader who met with Biden on Tuesday says he was dismissive of the photos she showed of starving Palestinian children because she had printed them out from her own iPhone. is that a tech
I saw
thing?
those.
Or is it an accusation that she's making it up?
I saw it. You see one starving Palestinian child.
Nah. Much like the 40 beheaded babies that he didn't see. Those fictional 40 beheaded babies affected him more. Amid protests for Netanyahu's ouster, rival Benny Gantz calls for early elections in September. Not that early. Because even Bibi's opposition wants more time to kill Palestinians. Iran vows retaliation for Israel's strike on its consulate. Ukraine lowers its conscription age to 25 to replenish diminishing troop levels. Trump coup lawyer John Eastman has officially been disbarred, which is pretty funny. And a judge rejects another Trump effort to delay one of his many legal battles. His hush money trial will start on April 15th. Alabama Mercedes workers to file for a union election as early as this week. Over 1,000 residents and fellows at UChicago Medicine vote to unionize. A 17-year-old found dead working at Republican Nebraska Governor Jim Pillen's hog farm. A member of the Texas National Guard has been caught migrant smuggling and charged with it. This is not the first time, by the way, that a guardsman has done this kind of thing. And despite the Alabama state legislature attempting to clean up after its Supreme Court, another hospital in the state is ceasing IVF services. And lastly, a study of the world's largest fossil fuel and cement firms finds that just 57 entities contribute to 80% of CO2 emissions in those fields. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome to the show, everybody. It's an EmMajority Report Thursday. We are happy to have you. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm
Breaking
here.
news. Sorry, I'm going to cut in. Biden is pissed. The temperature regarding Bibi is very high, one U.S. official said. So
We should probably tally. There should be some sort of like thread of how many reports we're getting leaked
sort of
about
abstract statements about
Biden's
frustrated.
mood. I don't care about his emotions or his mood. I care about the actions that are being taken. And let's dive into this here because, Biden is such an enormously committed Zionist that he is getting outflanked by his mentee, handpicked basically replacement in the Senate when he became vice president, Chris Coons, who spoke out this morning and said we should be conditioning aid to Israel, and literal Bush administration alumni. This is Richard Haas, who worked in the Bush administration, worked with Colin Powell, was a special assistant before that to H.W. Bush, not somebody who's an outsider, not somebody who has unorthodox opinions in the foreign policy space, to put it mildly. This is very much somebody who is within mainstream thought. And what's also really notable is that he said this on Biden's reportedly favorite show that he's obsessed with. Those aren't my words. Those are the reports about how committed Biden is to watching Morning Joe on MSNBC.
Yeah, of his limited remaining sort of consciousness, a lot of it is spent consuming this television product.
So I'm happy to see that this is being said on Morning Joe. As, we are up to untold levels of death in Gaza. We have no idea how bad it is because the death tolls have not been updated in around 2 months. The 32,000 figure is basically the cliff at which they could verify the dead. And even that 32,000 figure didn't include those missing and presumed dead under rubble. And that was before famine had started to set in. Famine is setting in, has set in. Israel has also made a point to bomb greenhouses, farmland, so food cannot be produced internally. This is called ecocide, which is something that they also have engaged in more moderate ways before. whenever there was a flare-up or some active resistance by the Palestinians towards their occupiers, they would put them on even more of a diet. Because as a reminder, Israel controls what goes in and what goes out of the Gaza Strip, controls their electricity, their water, everything about their daily life. So with all of that context, as we have no idea how many Palestinians have starved to death, as well as how many have been bombed to death or died suffocated under rubble, this is that former president of the Council on Foreign Relations, also Bush administration alumni, Richard Haass, imploring not just for conditioning aid to Israel, to Biden on his favorite morning program, but to sanction Israel, which is exactly where this conversation needs to start going.
Sitting around and talking how upset we are while we hemorrhage billions of dollars.
It's the worst of all worlds right now for the president. The criticism looks increasingly empty. It's 6 months. We're reaching the 6-month milestone of this war. That's one fact to begin with. And two things have happened in the last few days. One is these attacks are continuing. And yet, so are U.S. arms transfers to Israel without conditions. They've been going on for 6 months. Why does Israel need 2,000-pound bombs to be used in high-density populated areas? Then, 10 days ago, what does Israel do? It expropriates 2,000 acres of land in the West Bank for settlement construction. Where is the White House reaction to that? That is how you undo even the possibility, Joe was talking about it, of one day getting to a two-state solution. If you're going to have a Palestinian state, the last I checked, states are built on territory. If the territory isn't there to build it on, you can talk about two states till the cows come home. You don't have it. Where's the administration reaction to that? So at some point, the words become empty, and the Biden administration is very close to having reached a point where their criticism of Israel is too much for the same people who criticize Chuck Schumer, but it's not nearly enough to affect the course of what is going on. That is the worst of all possible worlds.
It looks weak and impotent. You were in the HW administration at the State Department.
At the White House.
At the White House. What would James Baker have done? And seriously, that's what we should be asking ourselves, because that was a moment when we were a diplomatic superpower.
So we confronted Israel. And if you remember at the time, Israel was subsidizing people leaving the Soviet Union, and they were going into the occupied territories. We basically said to Israel, we'll help these people to get out of the Soviet Union, but we're not going to subsidize their going into the West Bank. That forecloses options. We understand you may not have a Palestinian partner today, but we want to preserve the option for the day when we might be. And the administration basically said to the Israelis, you have a choice. They made their choice. There's that economic consequences. This administration has got to have some teeth in it.
So, Richard, let me put it bluntly to you. Does Benjamin Netanyahu give a damn that Joe Biden is upset, frustrated, and outraged by what he's seeing? And if not, what would make him give a damn?
No, he doesn't. And indeed, increasingly, he's trying to position himself as someone in front of the Israeli body politic saying, you may not like me. You may think I made a mistake on October 7th, but I'm all that stands between you and American pressure. So he doesn't care. What would he care about? He would care about damaging the relationship with Israel's most important benefactor. And that would mean the United States, I'm sorry to say, I'm sorry it's come to this, Willie, that we have to basically have some sanctioning of what Israel did. Not just the stuff in the UN. It's got to be conditioning arms deliveries, and it's got to be, I would think, some trade sanctions, for example, against goods coming out of West Bank settlements. Why should they be able to come here, for example, without certain tariffs or other economic penalties? We've got to basically, we can't have a policy based on persuading Israel. We have to increasingly have an independent policy that reflects our interests and values.
Coming up, our next guest.
Wow. So the good news for that is that Biden, I think, saw that, given the fact that he is such a massive fan of that program. Sanctioning is absolutely where we need to be reorienting this conversation. We're not talking anymore about just a ceasefire. We are well beyond that particular point. What we need to be doing is sanctioning this completely rogue state.
Yeah,
here.
and I don't talk of regime change, which is like, Benny Gantz talking about some far-off elections. Who cares?
Right.
Start pressuring them.
No. Time is of the essence.
Yeah.
We can't wait. We cannot wait. Yes.
Like any election that takes place in Israel that isn't under the context of, the world is sick of us doing this, we are under extreme pressure, is not interesting to me at all as like a expression of will. Yeah, it's a settler state that's in the midst of like supporting a guy who's executing a genocide in Bibi. Like, and they are behind him. Bibi's right about that. So like, yeah, the pressure needs to be external and from us.
Yeah, I mean, it's there was an opinion piece in the New York Times talking about how the two-state solution is actually a liberal mythology that is the less realistic solution here. If Bradley, you could pull up this map of the West Bank, and I mean, this doesn't even reflect all the settlements actually. So this is their ideal version of what a two-state solution would look like. Again, the Gaza Strip is entirely separate from the West Bank, and the West Bank does not have any of the territory on the border of the Mediterranean Sea, I mean, which is incredibly important for trade and prosperity for the country. And when you look at that West Bank map, just know that a significant portion of that territory is already controlled by Israeli settlers, and it's currently being incentivized by the Israeli government to settle there. So that from Richard Haas, that analysis was on point, except for that one particular portion there. It's going to have to be, in the end, a one-state democratic solution with full rights for all people, in the same way that South Africa had to be that way as well. A two-state solution is still racial segregation and apartheid, and is still not just for the amount of land and territory and blood that Israel has taken since the Nakba in 1948. I also will say it's quite amusing that you now hear Richard Haas, a former Bush administration, again, official, endorsing BDS. The S in BDS is sanctions. And for many years, and in a lot of states in this country, boycott, divest, sanctioning Israel is literally against the law. And expressing discontent towards Israel could get you fired in some states. There was an infamous case of a worker at a Texas school who I believe was Muslim American, who supported BDS and was fired from her job. So, you know, this is an indication, I think, of how far we have come in 6 months, and it took tens of thousands, and eventually it will be over 100,000 Palestinians, and that may be conservative.
Horrible way to be proven right.
Right, exactly. So we have a Republican endorsing, at least in part, BDS on Morning Joe. And will the Joe that listens to this, heed these calls? My God, it has taken way longer than I thought, because this is past the point of any rationality. This is really just an old man who can't let go of his prior romanticization of the settler colonial state of Israel. But I'm happy to see that the Overton window has shifted quite a bit. Before we get to our next guest, a word from some of our sponsors here. Did you know that Fast Growing Trees is the biggest online nursery in the United States with more than 10,000, I should say, not 100, 10,000 different kinds of plants and over 2 million happy customers in the U.S.? They have everything you could possibly want, like fruit trees, palm trees, evergreens, houseplants, and so much more. Whatever you're interested in, they have it for you. Find the perfect fit for your climate and space. Fast Growing Trees makes it easy to order online, and your plants are shipped directly to your door in 1 to 2 days. And along with their 30-day Alive and Thrive guarantee, they offer free plant consultation forever. Sam loves this company. He talks about it all the time. Look, I don't have the kind of living space where I can grow a lot of stuff, but I did get a small plant from Fast Growing Trees, and it's still kicking. Sam grows a bunch of different trees. I've heard the word bloomerang so many times, just because he talks about it off air, he talks about it on air, how much he enjoys Fast Growing Trees. You do not need to have a yard or a ton of space, as evidenced by me. I live in an apartment, and I was still able to order a great plant from Fast Growing Trees for my bookshelf. You can grow lemon, avocado, olive, or fig trees inside your home and on top of the wide variety of houseplants that they have available. The experts at Fast Growing Trees curate thousands of plants so you can find the perfect fit for your specific climate, location, and needs. You don't have to drive around to nurseries and big gardening centers. Fast Growing Trees makes it easy to order online and your plants are shipped to your door in 1 to 2 days. Whether you're looking to add some privacy, shade, or natural beauty to your yard, Fast Growing Trees has in-house experts ready to help you make the right selection with growing and care advice available 24/7. You can talk to a plant expert about your soil type, landscape design, how to take care of your plants, and everything else you need. No green thumb required. This spring, they have the best deals online, up to half off on select plants and other deals. And listeners to our show get an additional 15% off their first purchase when using the code MAJORITY at checkout. That's an additional 15% off at fastgrowingtrees.com using the code MAJORITY at checkout. Fastgrowingtrees.com use the code MAJORITY. Offer is valid for a limited time. Terms and conditions may apply. And lastly, you do not have to choose between better hair growth and your health. Nutrafol provides a whole body health approach for men that promotes healthier hair. No drugs, no compromises, just better hair. They also have products for women, I gotta say. You know, women who want to have thicker hair. Women like, I have a family friend who went through a health issue at a young age, and she lost some of her hair. And Nutrafol was a godsend for her. But for men, if you're experiencing a little thinness, and you don't want to take those prescription drugs that have side effects, Nutrafol is for you. Nutrafol's hair growth supplements are physician formulated using 100% drug-free ingredients. Their patented technology provides consistent, reliable results without compromising your sex life. While many supplements rely solely on ingredient studies, Nutrafol's clinically tested final formulations ensure their efficacy. In a clinical study, 84% of men showed improvement in their hair after 6 months taking Nutrafol's men hair growth supplements. 84%. Take their hair wellness quiz on Nutrafol.com/men for personalized healthcare plans based on your specific root causes. With Nutrafol, building a hair growth routine is simple. Purchase online, no prescription or doctor's visits required. Free shipping and automated deliveries ensure you'll never miss a day. You can see results in 3 to 6 months. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement brand with over 1 million people seeing thicker, stronger, faster growing hair with less shedding. Take the first step to visibly thicker, healthier hair. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com/men and enter the promo code TMR. Find out why over 4,000 healthcare professionals recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com/men, spelled Nutrafol.com/men, and enter promo code TMR. That's Nutrafol.com/men, promo code TMR. All right, guys, quick break and we'll be right back. We are back, and we are joined now by Arvin Alaigh, writer and activist from New Jersey, as well as a Ph.D. student at the University of Cambridge. Arvin wrote a piece in The Nation entitled "Abolishing the Ballot Line Will Reshape Progressive Politics." Arvin, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for inviting me, Emma. I'm a huge fan.
Oh, I appreciate that. Well, we're both from New Jersey, Bradley as well. So, Matt, I'm sorry you're the odd one out here today. But I had been looking for somebody to speak about this really important win for progressives in New Jersey. The ballot line is now no longer going to be a part of the voting process in New Jersey. Could you explain, Arvin, what the ballot line is and why it was kind of unique to New Jersey politics when people went to vote?
Yeah, absolutely. So the ballot line refers to the format of a primary ballot in New Jersey, right? So New Jersey, until I guess this preliminary injunction that was just passed down last week by a federal judge, was the only state in the whole country to use this very specific format of primary ballot, where essentially what you had was you had one column with all of the county party endorsements. Often that would be anchored up top by whoever's on the top of the ticket. So usually it'd be a governor or a presidential candidate or a senator. So we can take this cycle, for example, right? On one column would have been Joe Biden's name. And below that would have been the county chairs or the county party's endorsements for House of Representatives, for town council, for all the way down to like the local level.
Yeah, let's pull that up here. We have an example image for people watching on YouTube and the podcast audience here. Let's so you can see there, Arvin, keep going, but the how the county line is represented there by all of the candidates under Joe Biden in that column.
Yeah, absolutely. So what you
and
have,
Bernie Sanders is on the outside. This is from 2020. So
yeah,
the candidates that look
out there on my own.
Right. It creates this sense of kind of officialness, right? Or for a regular Democratic Party voter that just wants to not think too hard about it, you're just going to go down that column as opposed to going horizontally.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it is, right? So you have, for candidates for like House, for example, right? It could be a really contested primary with a really progressive candidate and a more establishment corporate centrist or something, right? And pretty much every single time the county party will endorse that corporate centrist, right? County parties really make their endorsements based off of things like fundraising potential and personal wealth, right? And these are really the only things that would go into a county party's endorsement of a candidate. So when you have someone like Joe Biden, or when you have someone like Cory Booker, who for all his corporate affiliations is still wildly popular in New Jersey, right? Anchoring on the top of a single column, the average primary voter is relatively low information, doesn't have the name recognition of every single candidate for every down ballot office, right? So they are more often than not just going to go down the line and select whoever's underneath the names that they recognize. And on that Monmouth County ballot that you were just showing, you saw random candidates in down ballot offices in random corners of the ballot, right? And that's what activists would call ballot Siberia, right? So to be caught in ballot Siberia, right, means that it's not even known whether you'll be seen on the ballot, let alone selected, right? And there is a Rutgers University public policy academic, Julia Sass-Rubin, who has been the sort of resource on this. She's done empirical studies to show that on average, the ballot line endorsement gives 38% advantage, which essentially, right, is determining elections. It's completely determining elections. And in another sense, right, when we think about progressive energy and grassroots energy, wielding political force, this doesn't really occur in New Jersey, right? Because primary candidates will never oust incumbents under this format. It's never happened in recent memory. In 2018 and 2020, you had all these, nationwide sweeps of, you had AOC, right? You had even folks like Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, who were contesting open primaries, but they would, in New Jersey, candidates like that would never get the county endorsement, and they were just completely locked out of power. So this could really open up New Jersey to progressive energy in a way that hasn't been seen before in a very, very long time.
Yeah, and I mean, it's such a relic of the New Jersey party machinery, and we see this in a lot of blue states, right? I mean, California has its own Democratic Party machine that tamps down progressive energy. New York State, we saw many of the obstacles that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had to overcome in her challenge of Joe Crowley, which made it, I think, that much more impressive. But this is, as you say, distinct to New Jersey, and when you mention how there were haven't really been these kind of insurgent progressive candidates who have had success, I remember Lisa McCormick in 2018 when she challenged Menendez, who at that time had already been like he was, what was it, a hung jury or something? He didn't actually.
It was a hung jury.
It was a hung jury. Yeah, he had been involved in a corruption case previously. This is the second time around, so he already had that stink on him. But Lisa McCormick in 2018 had no campaign, no funding, and she still did quite well. But because of these barriers, Menendez got reelected for another term.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Lisa McCormick is a great example of, I don't even think she raised like over $10,000 in her campaign. Like in the Senate campaign in New Jersey, you need millions of dollars to even be viable, right? And basically Menendez's control over the machines, over the county parties, scared away any contenders. And it really, he's like the sort of prototypical example of New Jersey politics historically, right? Openly corrupt, but getting off on technicalities and just brazen about just not being actually supported by people and supported by corporations and rich donors instead. And I think Menendez is an important figure to think about alongside what's happened in the last couple months, right? Because it's out of this context of Menendez and the gold bars and the complete cartoonish corruption that eyes have been on New Jersey and eyes have been on New Jersey politics in a way that they hadn't been before, right? So when you had someone like Andy Kim, who personally, he's okay. He's a sort of liberal, down the line liberal who he swung a red district in 2018, I think, or 2020. So is a decent, and he could be punching left more than he is. So he's, okay, but he's not like a progressive, I don't think. But when you had someone like him who has this sort of character, he went viral on like January 7th, I think, for being photographed sweeping up, the insurrectionist debris after the Capitol riots. And he's seen as this like very, like, he loves like dad jokes, and he's seen as this like virtuous sort of candidate. When you see him being screwed over by a process like this, combined with the fact that New Jersey has been in the news around corruption, I think it just was the perfect storm. And that's what activists who I talked to in this piece described to me. And,
so talk a bit more about Andy Kim's role in getting this overturned and changing the ballots for good in New Jersey, because people may not realize this, but the governor of New Jersey, Phil Murphy, former Goldman Sachs guy, who very much used the county line to his advantage when he first got elected, had put up his wife, the First Lady of New Jersey, to run for Senate to replace Menendez. And Andy Kim had gotten a real head start. He's raised a lot of money. The voters in New Jersey want to get rid of Menendez. And it seemed to be a foregone conclusion that Andy Kim would be the next senator from New Jersey. But Phil Murphy said, no, my wife wants to run. And she started getting a lot of these endorsements, which would have meant that she could have been that county line candidate that could have been put over the edge just based on these endorsements. So take us through the how her entry into the race kind of made Andy Kim act in this way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Tammy Murphy's entry into the race, I think it was in November, like late November, sort of just blew up the entire race, right? Because like you said, Andy Kim had announced on the heels of these Menendez indictments that came down in September. I think it was that same week that that the news was broken that he had announced. So he had been in the race for 2 months. He was seen as, this complete foil, character foil, political foil to Bob Menendez, and the sort of runaway favorite in the primary. And then Tammy Murphy, who's the first lady, she's a former registered Republican. She gave money to Republicans throughout the early 2000s, who, who knows what her politics are personally, but she probably would have been like a standard run-of-the-mill Democratic senator had she been elected. But she, against the sort of Democratic mandate that existed, was collecting county endorsements, county party endorsements. And counties, there's 21 counties in New Jersey. Each of them, none of them are exactly the same with regards to how they, carry themselves. Some of them, endorse democratically, where they'll sort of take a vote at what they call a convention as to who will get the endorsement. Some of them are just, it's an executive committee that will just hand it down from the top down. And what you had was Andy Kim winning the endorsements of the more democratically oriented counties, and the ones that were top down, like these patronage network county parties, Tammy Murphy was sweeping those. And a lot of those are the really vote rich ones, the really populist ones. So she was going to have a huge advantage going into this. But it took, I think it was, Andy Kim, it was Menendez, it was the sort of perfect storm, and like the blatant theft of this primary. Really, things started moving after the lawsuit was filed in late February. And when it was first filed, right, the county line was seen as this immovable thing for years, right? For years, New Jersey progressives especially had known that this was the biggest impediment to progressive politics in the state. So when Andy Kim first came out joined by 2 congressional candidates, came out with this lawsuit, it was sort of panned as this Hail Mary. Of course, this is not going to touch the county line. This has existed for decades. This is going to long outlast this race, right? But I think it was the perfect storm of grassroots support. And then you had machine politicians in counties like Hudson County who were coming out against the county line. You had the mayor of Jersey City, Steve Fulop, who's a gubernatorial candidate for 2025. You had him flip his endorsement from Tammy Murphy to Andy Kim.
After the case was after the ballot county line was overturned on the ballot, he switched his endorsement. Before. Wow.
Yeah, about a week or two before. So I think New Jersey politicians are always going to see where the wind is blowing, right? Obviously they're self-serving in a way that is cartoonish, right? Like we've seen with Bob Menendez, but you saw this tide turning in real time between the end of February and the end of March when the injunction was granted. So you had one of the biggest blows was actually the New Jersey Attorney General, who's a Murphy appointee, came out and said publicly that his office released a memo that said, we're going to not partake in this lawsuit because we don't find this to be constitutional, the county line in the first place. So we're going to stay out of this. Which apparently, he's a Murphy appointee, right? And this absolutely incensed the governor to have one of his own just completely drive the stake through the heart of the county line like this. And I think by mid to late March, the tide was turning, and it was clear that even if the judge maintained that it was constitutional, everyone was scrambling. Politicians in Trenton were now scrambling to have their workarounds because they want to keep the county line because they're the reason that they're in office is because of the county line, right?
Same with Phil Murphy. I mean, you write about this in your piece, how basically he bought these county endorsements because of how wealthy he was. I mean, he put $10 million of his own money into his 2017 gubernatorial campaign.
Yeah, exactly. So in 2016, 2017, and there was, Tom Moran, who's one of the big op-ed writers in New Jersey, he writes for the Star-Ledger, had this really great op-ed from 2016 sort of calling out Phil Murphy on literally just buying off the primary. There was a competitive primary. There were, I think, 3 or 4 candidates. I think there were 2 that were really progressive. Phil Murphy, who had never held elected office, he just had served as ambassador to Germany. And, these ambassadorships are given just to donors, right? So he had only been a Goldman Sachs employee before this, and he just sort of showered every county chair in money. And there are two counties that don't use the county line. And of course, one of the counties that don't use the county line, he lost in. That's the only county he lost in I think it was Salem County that doesn't use the line.
Yeah. It was Jim Johnson, and I forget who the other candidate was.
It was Steve Wynowski, I think was his name.
Yeah.
He was like a state senator.
Right. Jim Johnson, Montclair's own. So I knew him a little bit. I knew his kid. They lost really handily in a way that didn't make a ton of sense because of that exact county line endorsement. I think I remember the discourse around that being very much, well, Murphy got on the county line, so that's how things were going to go.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I guess to wrap things up here, do you foresee maybe not this election cycle, obviously, because we're too far down the line, but in 2026, in 2028, more and more progressive candidates taking a chance to run in New Jersey?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know if this is like necessarily enough to like propel a progressive wave, but this is the biggest impediment by far, right? And I think, over the years, I've been involved in, political organizing and stuff, and I've talked to folks in these, organizations like Justice Democrats, organizations like Brand New Congress back in 2018 when they were sort of more active, and there were folks that would just say, of course, we're not going to touch New Jersey. There's no point, right? We're wasting our money there, right? So this has been known in political circles that this line has existed, and it's discouraged progressive candidates and progressive organizations from really doing anything in the state. So I think if everything holds as it is, so right now there's been a preliminary injunction that's been granted by this federal judge, essentially meaning that for the Democratic primary of 2024, ballot lines cannot be, or like the county line can't be used, and what they're going to have to be used, office block is basically what every other thing uses, where it has President Joe Biden, Donald Trump, Senator Cory Booker, Bob Hugin or something, right? Like they'll have, it won't be like in this sort of confusing line format, right? It'll be just by office divided up, and you can't really, in the same, it's not as obvious as to who the county endorsements are. But yeah, I think this is really going to throw the doors open, at least to organizations and to progressive energy. And I do think that, and I think it's good for the national progressive movement, right? I think another source of like progressive
deep
energy.
Blue state, right? Where you can almost just these deep blue districts are the exact kind of like laboratory where these DSA candidates should be running. I mean, that's 100%. How we got Ilhan Omar. That's how we got Rashida Tlaib. That's how we got AOC. This is where you can kind of put more progressives in Congress and increase leverage in that way. Anyway, really appreciate your time today. Everyone can read the piece, Abolishing the Ballot Line Will Reshape Progressive Politics. It's in The Nation. Arvin Alaigh, writer, activist from New Jersey, getting his Ph.D. at University of Cambridge. Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. Well, we will take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to be talking to Mya Frazier about the eviction process in our country. Quick break. back, and we are joined now by Mya Frazier, investigative journalist based in Ohio, fellow at the Watchdog Writers Group at the University of Missouri School of Journalism, whose latest piece in Harper's is entitled The Eviction Experts. Mya, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for your interest.
So your piece starts off in 2021 at a meeting for the Columbus Apartment Association, this landlord lobbying group in Ohio. And this is in the immediate aftermath of the COVID eviction moratorium expiring. What did you see at this meeting, this kind of conference that you went to, which when I was reading your piece in Harper's, it gave me kind of chills down my spine about how corporatized and how automated, honestly, this process of evicting people from their homes is beginning to become.
Yeah, I had started spending some time at my local eviction court during the pandemic from some previous stories I'd been working on. And I started getting interested in this one law firm who filed the most evictions in court, and was trying to understand sort of the power dynamics within my local eviction court. And someone mentioned, the main managing partner of this law firm that files the most evictions in Columbus mentioned he was, headed to promote their services at this conference. And so, I headed out there that day and was really kind of intrigued by what I found, because it was a lot of these booths that you would think at an apartment association, there were the normal booths for cleaning up, apartments that were messed up or landscaping and so on. But there was also just this very all these booths, tech booths. It was almost kind of like a bunch of startups and promoting a lot of services that would allow landlords to not even be directly involved in managing their properties. And so that was very intriguing, just the rise of prop tech, which is this industry that is just during that time frame was getting billions of dollars in investment.
Yeah, you have a sentence here that I thought summed it up quite nicely. Two converging trends, the automation of property management and Wall Street's consolidation of America's rental housing stock, had exacerbated the already uneven power dynamics of the landlord-tenant relationship. And that the symbolism of what you saw in that particular meeting or conference seems to represent that. If you could just speak to those two trends in particular and what you witnessed and what you wrote about, both the automation of property management, as you touched on there, and Wall Street's involvement as well.
Certainly. Sorry, now my iMessage is going. Certainly.
We don't hear it, don't worry.
The interesting thing that I saw was that I was watching what was going on in eviction court. I was watching the efficiencies that this local law firm had there and trying to understand how is that possible. And so in understanding the growth of property management, you saw how they were able to prepare all the documents, all the information that was necessary to start an eviction. So there is almost like a triggering mechanism that's possible now within property management, within these software systems, where there's just certain conditions they're able to put on the inflows of rent, the late fees, what would trigger an eviction, and just the ease with which they're able to then port that information to a landlord attorney and proceed with the eviction process.
It's almost like artificial intelligence, AI, to a degree, of who meets this criteria for eviction, and then they work kind of hand in hand with legal representatives. You highlight this powerful law firm, Willis Law, and their bundling of these eviction cases for the courts in Columbus in particular. What did that look like? This law firm that seemingly has made a bit of a specialty in representing these landlords in eviction cases in Ohio.
Yeah, so the issue with eviction court, depending on where you are, is whether or not you need a representative in court to proceed with an eviction. And you used to not have to have that in Columbus. There was a practice known as sort of eviction by affidavit, where this law firm would take affidavits from the property manager and proceed forward with the evictions. And it can be time consuming. Like, for a landlord to deal with an eviction, to have to go to court is time consuming. Now, there was a legal fight where that practice was outlawed, but it didn't do much to stop this sort of batching of evictions on the docket. So the sort of brilliance of their business model, Willis Law, is they're able to go to their clients and say, we're very efficient. You don't have to give up the labor time of sending your property manager to be there all day or to go on multiple days. They're able to go, say, on one day and deal with 20, 30 evictions at one time, which I witnessed quite frequently. I spent a lot of time there, and certain cases would be called up for a very specific property, and they would just be taken care of very, very quickly. So, and out of the dockets, which often ran over 100 a day, Willis would dominate that. They would have the vast majority of those cases on an ongoing basis. And although I never was able to figure out how much they were making on each of those evictions, it's plainly a very, very profitable practice to batch and evict quite frequently for landlords at that level of efficiency.
And Columbus in particular was a hotbed of evictions. I hadn't realized how frequent evictions were in Columbus until obviously I read your piece. But so I guess if you could just speak to how frequent they've become and what the pandemic looked like within that context.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's fascinating is the city has really taken up the issue of evictions since about 2016. When Evicted by Matthew Desmond was published, it was read quite widely among the city's elite, and there was a commission that was formed by the mayor. He appointed his wife to head it up, and there was a concerted effort to recognize the city had a problem. Columbus has had tremendous growth compared to other cities in Ohio, and we've had just skyrocketing rents. I live here, so it's something I've experienced and witnessed. And you would think that might have put a dent in the filings. And what's a little disturbing and concerning, quite frankly, for a Midwest city that had, for decades been quite affordable, is despite valiant efforts by the city, by the legal aid community, is seeing more evictions than they ever had. And also during this time frame, during the pandemic, during a phase when about $130 million in rental assistance was funneled, through this court, and essentially, it depending on your vantage or how you think about such things, like enriching landlords through that process, during a time of, economic upheaval, when, the risk of having properties during, times of crises, things went on as normal, and they had some of their best years ever during the pandemic. Rents were at their highest rate. Occupancy rates were really high. Yet the thing that I found from just spending time and embedding myself at eviction court is the evictions kept happening. There was sort of this I think, a sense that the moratoriums stopped evictions, but they didn't. I mean, thousands of people were still evicted, and you know, despite 100 and in this small area on the national level, it was about $46 billion, but they really did not stop for any length of time.
So the millions poured into the landlords, and they seemed quite content. But evictions, even though there was a moratorium, that didn't curb, or did it curb slightly during some period of time? Either way, though, the tenants didn't, outside of the payments that came from the federal government, the one under Trump, and then when right after Biden got elected, there really was no. It was very asymmetrical what tenants received in terms of protections versus the millions that were flowing into the coffers of landlords.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that was most on a very detailed level is this money was flowing in, the crisis was unfolding, yet the late fees and the court fees were still tacked on to each of these cases. And so there was really no give in the system. The landlords were being made whole, and the tenants, in some cases, I mean, to be accurate, I did see, and this was unusual during, the big infusions of that money, some tenants did get, $5,000-$8,000 in rent arrears paid off, and they were saved from evictions. But often there was, $1,000 in late fees tacked onto that the landlord was able to, profit from, because in a lot of cases these were very egregious late fees within the local context that I saw. So yeah, I mean, I think the issue that I found so fascinating in working on this is there really was just a really big disconnect between landlords are going to be made whole, but there were going to be no conditions on how they treated tenants throughout this process, and very little restrictions on no restrictions on rent increases or late fees.
We're in a bubbling national discourse about squatters' rights right now, right? And the notion that this is in some way a real hindrance to landlords and their ability to do what they want to do with their tenants. And but as your piece really lays bare, there are a lot of protections in place for landlords legally, and very little protections in place for people who may not be able to afford their rent for a little while. I mean, what were some of the cases that you saw where people were pushed out of their homes because of circumstances maybe that they even couldn't control?
Well, I mean, certainly in the context of rent increases, that's out of the control of tenants. And, in sort of an economic environment, particularly in Columbus, where you're not seeing significant wage increases, people end up just in a vicious cycle of not being able to, afford where they're living. And I mean, rent increases anywhere from, I've seen 30% rent increases for tenants. When I spoke and communicated with them about their struggles. And so there's really no way for someone who's working a low wage job to keep up with that level of rent increase.
Right. And so when, say, your rent gets increased 30%, you don't have anywhere to go, and you are evicted, but you're staying longer as you figure out your next move, that would be an example of why squatters' rights would be important, or tenants' rights, versus the right of a landlord to evict whenever they choose.
Yeah, I memean, I think the challenge of the moment is landlord-tenant law is a very local matter. It varies state by state. It can even vary city by city. And so a lot of the push on that I saw in talking to a lot of tenants' rights groups and national groups that are studying this problem is that there's really no way out of this bind unless there's some federal regulation on what's going on for within landlord tenant law.
Right.
That's a challenging, complicated, yeah, I mean, how that unfolds. I mean, there's been some various attempts. There's been some really interesting proposals, but I think we're very early days on how to sort of address this gap between sort of the legal context at the local level and the limits of federal intervention into the housing crisis that, I saw, if it's even happening in Columbus, Ohio, where, pretty much rents were mostly affordable in my lifetime and have just in the last 10 years become just punitive to the point of impossible for most people. The question of kind of how to solve that is, I think, remains an open question.
Certainly. I mean, we're getting a little bit of a trickle out from the Biden administration that they see housing as a problem. I'd said a few months ago Biden should run on a national housing initiative, but we haven't federally funded affordable housing since the 90s because of the Faircloth Amendment and like these neoliberal practices. We should have some sort of standardized national rent control in addition to building more housing and zoning practices so there can be duplexes and really though I just can't imagine how in any just society a 30% rental increase should be allowed. I mean, that should be federally regulated as an undue burden on the tenant, but we don't have tenants protections nationally in this country whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, the push for a tenant bill of rights was kind of, was the blueprint in January of 2023. Yeah, so we're a year later now. What that's sort of been diluted down to is a possible cap of 10% on rent increases for housing that's that receives low-income housing tax credits in the U.S. So that's an interesting proposal, but it would only impact about 2.5 million households. And when you think about there's 44 million rental households, is that enough? And additionally, the people I interviewed at Eviction Court, the people I spend time with in other reporting that I'm doing, a 10% increase is still impossible economically for most people.
Right.
I mean, 30% is out there, but even capping at 10% is, inflation rates of 4 and 5% put people under. At 10% for one of your biggest monthly expenses is impossible for a lot of people, and can lead to them being displaced and without housing. So,
and as we wrap up here, Mya, what in your observations, what was the kind of or what were the kind of people who were landlords, right? And who were the kind of people who were tenants? Are you seeing this kind of rapid increase in corporately owned housing in Columbus? I mean, you speak about this automated landlord system, but for the kind of more existing structure in Columbus, who are the landlords, and then who are the tenants, really?
Columbus has seen a mass infusion of investment from out of state and a lot of consolidation into. It's not just that you have landlords who are, Wall Street owners, but you have property management systems that operate for smaller landlords. So even this idea of a mom and pop landlord, maybe someone who in the past had 10 to 12 properties that they managed personally, they're now turning that over to these property management, either companies or software programs that really takes a lot of the human discretion out of that relationship. So you're seeing that I think on a pretty rapid, it's almost a complete change in how that relationship worked. And so I've seen that here, where it just, people have kind of given up and just turned over the management of that to other companies. So that's a significant change in how tenants sort of interacted with their landlords. I would say for tenants, I think the frustrating thing that I've seen from them is they just can't negotiate with anybody. It's very difficult to begin a conversation about, I'm having an issue, I had my car break down, I can't make my rent this month, and just a little lack of accommodation or grace within the system because of the way that these metrics that are now being applied through property management software to making decisions about ensuring the landlord's not just profitability, but perhaps excessive profitability in their portfolios. So
yes.
That's a vast change. Yeah.
My building in COVID, and I moved into this building. I'm here in Brooklyn, probably around 6 months after one of these corporate conglomerates purchased it. And the tenants that were there before speak of an entirely different situation until after this management company purchased it. And I will say that the only way I got my air conditioning repaired last summer, in the middle of the summer, in August, after it breaking down for 2 months, was I had to file a complaint with the city, and they came and inspected it and issued a violation, and that was the only way that it got fixed. So it also leaked into the floorboards and warped, and mold was starting. So it was a total nightmare. And it's one of the, this is universal, I gotta say. Like, this is exactly something I had experienced too. And at least the unit is rent controlled. That's part of why they are so hesitant to improve it, because they can't gouge people. But you're even showing that in places where there's no rent control and they go up 30%, there are still those conditions that are created because there's this kind of impunity right now for landlords, especially when they're big corporations and it becomes so standardized.
Certainly. Yeah. I think that even adding to that, there's a lot of informal displacement of tenants, especially within low-income housing that is available. In Columbus, we had 2 mass displacements of people within a 2-year period. You're talking not a few, 30, 40 people, like hundreds of families in a single day displaced. So there's nowhere for them to go. Right. It's just getting harder for people to, find a viable situation to just live their daily lives. So yeah.
Well, I appreciate your time today, and the piece is really good in Harper's. It's called The Eviction Experts, and we will link to it wherever you're listening to or watching this. Mya Frazier, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you.
All right, folks, with that, we're going to wrap up the free part of this program, head into the fun half, where we will take your calls and read your IMs. The number is 646-257-3920, and we will be joined by our friends Brandon Sutton and Matt Binder. First, Matt Leck, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Oh yeah, Left Reckoning. We had Matt Huber on to talk about climate change and some if Marx's materialist approach and whether he was pro-production and growth or not. And also got into this Amazon story where they had this AI-backed technology where you could just walk out of the store. I don't know if you guys heard about this. Yeah, but apparently that was actually you being watched on camera by guys in India, and they would add up what you put in your into your thing. So yeah, that's over now. So check that out, patreon.com/leftreckoning. Yeah.
Basically, it was advertised that like you could scan a QR code and they would itemize you checking out, but it was actually like thousands of low wage Southeast Asian workers like tabulating every item that you had checked out instead. And they were saying, "Oh, it's an AI powered like software or mechanism to like assist with even less interference than self checkout provided," and yet it was literally low wage work.
right.
supplementing that instead.
Okay, well, there you go. Brandon, we hear you, but your mic is on a different setting, so it's like I think it's your computer mic. So before we bring you in, I'm just flagging that for you. On ESPN on Monday, we talked about the Elite Eight. We talked about the Jonte Porter betting probe and what it means for sports more broadly, a bit of the NBA playoffs, the Cinderella story of NC State, LSU Iowa, which then ended up Iowa winning that game, and how awesome really the women's tournament has been for college basketball. Because really for men's college basketball, a lot of the top prospects are choosing to actually get paid for their labor, and they're going to they're going internationally. They're going to the G League, and I think it's a great improvement. But that means the women's game is just higher quality.
Also, and probably making a lot more money now, and the women should also start asking for their slice of pie.
Exactly. Hello, do you hear us?
Hello.
Oh, sounds
I
great.
can hear you.
There we go. Perfect.
I was laughing.
What's up, Brandon?
Nothing. I was just laughing because I was thinking AI stands for abused Indian.
AI stands for what?
Abused Indian, not artificial intelligence.
Jesus.
Yeah, there's a Gizmodo piece that was people were realizing their receipts weren't coming to them until hours after. And it's because these guys were poring over the surveillance footage, being like, did they take that cupcake or did they put it back?
Did you? I saw that TikTok that people were saying had aged so well, but I didn't have that context of forget it. Well, it's too vague for me to describe. But anyway, Brandon, what's happening over on the discourse?
Yes, we will have something out for you this weekend, maybe two somethings, because I want to talk about movies this week. And I plan on talking about movies. Whether or not I find anyone to talk with me about movies is the real question. But so
why haven't you invited me to talk movies? That's something I very much enjoy. You
know what? You can come on. I want to talk about Madam Web. But you can pick a movie that you want to talk about.
All right, maybe another time.
No, you can pick a movie that you want to talk about, and I will watch it, and we can talk about it. Any movie you want.
All right. Well, we'll sort that out offline. Hello, Matt Binder.
Hello. How are you?
I am well, and how are you in your 3 shows?
I'm doing all right. Guess I'll get right to it, right? Tonight on Leftist Mafia. Tonight on Leftist Mafia, Ole should be joining us. She was supposed to join us last week, but something came up and we had to postpone her appearance to this week. So check that out tonight at youtube.com/MattBinder. Also, there is a new episode of Doomed up on the YouTube channel as well. Looked over, basically broke down and watched a couple of clips regarding what Israel's been up to this week. So, you could imagine.
The reports out of Al-Shifa, we still don't fully know what happened at Al-Shifa, and when we hear that, it's gonna be gruesome. I've seen photos, but you can't verify, obviously, yet.
Yeah, executions and things like that. Yeah.
Right. And so check it out, youtube.com/MattBinder.
All right. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous? You're a little bit upset? You're riled up?
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 eighths, 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
Do.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook.
Throw our hands up.
Ooh. Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
We are back, folks. Back on the Majority Report. Fun half, Matt Binder, Brandon Sutton, Matt Leck, Bradley Alsop, and me. And me. And little old me.
Okay, Eeyore.
Yeah.
That Eeyore energy.
Yeah. Womp womp. Let's do gosh. What should we do here?
Clips, right?
Yeah, we have some clips, but I haven't decided, I guess, which direction we want to go. Like, are we doing genocide right off the rip, or
I feel like it's always best to cover the more, weighty, serious stuff first, and then we can have a little bit of fun towards the end.
I think you're right. So, the 7 central kitchen aid workers that were killed by Israeli airstrikes seems to be eliciting